Yo, what's good, everybody? Good morning. Happy Monday. So in this video, we're gonna cover personality disorders, which is it's a pretty simple concept to understand, but I could definitely see people getting like tricked on these because like they all kind of sound similar. But I think I don't know with me and psych, I feel like psych is actually pretty like interesting almost. It kind of feels like a TV show almost. So it's easier to memorize for me. But let's get started. So first thing you should probably do is to ask yourself which cluster the patient belongs to, and the clusters are divided into A, B, and C. A weird, B wild, and C worried. And I think once you kind of like categorize into these clusters, like the personality trait diagnosis is like they just become a lot clearer. But yeah, you have cluster A, which is like they're odd or eccentric. You have cluster B, which is dramatic and impulsive, and you have cluster C, which is anxious and fearful. And then cluster A, the weird cluster. You have schizoid, schizotypical, and paranoid. In schizoid, just think of like Batman almost. They have a lack of desire for relationships. They are pretty, cold, and they're like they want to be alone most of the time. Um, but like sometimes in the NBME, like you'll get a question where like, oh, like this person is married, which is like kind of like how did they even get married, right? I don't know, but um, the question stem will say like, oh, but this person still wants to like stay by himself or something like that. So just think of Batman, you know. Schizotypical. Oh, and then schizoid is egocentric, meaning they like choose to be, they want to be alone. And schizotypical, you have um, odd beliefs and eccentric behavior, and they believe in magical thinking or supernatural ideas. And um, they, unlike schizoid, they want relationships, but are a little bit too strange or out there to maintain them. And then in paranoid, it involves persistent distrust and suspicion. And so they always think that somebody or somebody's just trying to get at them, or like trying to harm them, or deceive them. So and then just remember that the projection is a common defense mechanism for paranoid personality types. And then you have cluster B, which includes antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic. So antisocial is um, is a behavior disorder that involves violating the rights of others, and they have no regrets about it. Like they're just like, hell yeah, like I'm gonna beat them up. I'm not gonna feel nothing. And then these patients, they lie, they manipulate, and they break laws. But yeah, remember that they just have a lack of conscience. Okay, and it's antisocial when they're over the age of 18, and then before that it's just conduct disorder. Okay, so if they're over the age of 18, then it becomes antisocial. But if they're below the age of 18, um it's still seen as conduct disorder. Okay, so just remember that. I feel like that's a pretty important part. The answer choices might include antisocial and conduct, but you just gotta look at their age. Okay. And then borderline, I think borderline is low key the most uh high yield out of the whole personality questions. I feel like this one comes up a lot. Okay, borderline is emotional instability, and these patients, they have like very intense relationships and fear of abandonment. And the clue is that they may engage in self-harm. Like they have parasuicidal behavior. So like sometimes like the question will be like, yeah, like I like the person tried like the person broke up with like their boyfriend or something, and then she like tries to kill herself, something like that. So it's like if that comes up, it's usually borderline, okay? And you have histrionic, which is it involves attention seeking behavior, and these patients are very dramatic, very theatrical, and often they're very like sexually provocative, and they're very flirtatious people. So think of a guy who wears bright colors, right? So think of like I don't know, like a clown, but I mean, clown, that's a job, but you know what I mean? Like those types of colors, you know? And narcissistic is, it involves grandiosity and entitlement, and they believe that, like, they should be the first ones in line, or like, you know what I mean? So, like, and it's also important to know that they lack empathy. So, like, a typical question for narcissistic is like they're at a hospital, but then like they start complaining because like they had to wait like 5 minutes, you know? So it's just like kind of like that. Like they start going off for waiting for like 5 minutes. So it's kind of like that entitlement behavior that is seen. And cluster C is worried. And you have avoidant dependent, and OCPD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, personality disorder. So in avoidant, these patients, they want relationships, but they avoid them because they're afraid of being rejected, essentially. And this is also different from schizoid because they actually want connection, but is unable to engage in it, and so that's why they're ego dystonic. Whereas schizoid and obsessive compulsive is ego syntonic. Okay, and then dependent disorder is like it involves like extreme reliance on others, and they struggle to make decisions, and feel very helpless alone. So like, don't think of it as like, oh, like anytime I go outside with my girlfriend, like she can't decide on what she wants to eat. It's not even like that, because at the end of the day, she will decide like what she wants to eat. But these patients are like, they really cannot make a decision by themselves. Okay, and then OCPD, it involves like perfectionism and rigid control, and they're very inflexible people, and they're obsessed with order. And the difference between obsessive compulsive personality disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, is that OCPD, they don't have intrusive thoughts or compulsions. Okay, and yeah, that's the general summary. I feel like the most important one is definitely, I want to say narcissistic is definitely seen, and borderline. And I think cluster B is very important. I think sometimes you do get questions on cluster A, but it's pretty rare. And I feel like this is like pretty. Just don't get these two mixed up because they sound the same. Schizoid is Batman, and schizotypical is like fairies and stuff. But like avoidant and dependent are pretty self-explanatory. And I've never really seen cluster C being asked, to be honest. So, okay, so this is the sample question. So I'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And obviously, you can take more than 5 seconds. I'm just saying. Okay, here's the answer. Okay, so which of the following personality disorders best explains this patient's pattern of behavior? A 20-year-old woman is brought to the emergency department by a roommate after ingesting an unknown quantity of acetaminophen tablets following an argument with her boyfriend. She states, I didn't actually want to die. I just want him to realize how much he hurt me. Over the past year, she has had multiple brief romantic relationships characterized by intense attachment, followed by sudden breakups due to fear of abandonment. She reports frequently feeling empty and says her mood can change within hours, depending on how others treat her. Her roommate reports episodes of impulsive spending, reckless driving, and occasional binge drinking. The patient has a brief history of superficial cutting during periods of interpersonal stress. During an interview, she alternates between praising the physician as the only person who understands me and accusing the staff of not caring if I live or die. Which of the following personality disorders best explain this patient pattern of behavior? Okay. So, I'm sure you have a pretty good clue that the answer is A, right? But you know, the reason why it's A is because you have this like suicidal gesture, right? You have suicidal gesture after a conflict with her boyfriend. She has fears of abandonment, and she's had multiple brief romantic relationships. So it kind of shows that her relationships have been pretty unstable, right? She's had multiple of them in like a short amount of time, essentially. Oh, and then she also has some impulsivity with like spending, like reckless driving, and like binge drinking. And she also have a self injury, right? Self injury here, and she also has some some mood swings. It looks like, right? Like when she's dealing with the physician versus the staff, um or like that's like, I guess that's an example of like splitting. She sees it as black and white, like she sees the physician as good and she sees staff as bad. So that's kind of splitting behavior, which is like pretty highly seen in borderline personality disorders. And so that's why the answer is A. For these, I don't think you can't really do the bottom, top, or looking at the most objective finding, because obviously it's like you need the whole question for these type of questions. um but yeah, it's not B because uh it doesn't really show that the patient is clingy. And independent personality disorder, there's no self-harm or there's no impulsivity. It's not histrionic because it's not like, I mean, it kind of does sound like she's kind of seeking some attention, but in histrionic, you'll never see self harm or like unstable identity. Okay, and narcissistic, she's narcissistic. People are not fear of they don't have fear of abandonment, and they're looking for admiration instead, and so it's kind of like, yeah, there it is. The fear of abandonment is there, so it's not narcissistic. And then obsessive compulsive, not really applicant to this question stem at all, right? Because they're not trying to like control anyone. It's just like they're just harming themselves after a breakup. And I feel like the best, yeah, the best answer to it is it's all pointing to borderline, right? So that is that. And just the quick summary slide. Yeah, just like remember the clusters, and then remember the personality traits that goes in those clusters, and I feel like everything else is pretty self-explanatory. So cluster A, yeah, just remember that it's, you know, um, sorry, I just had like a huge brain fart. Just remember the clusters pretty much, and then everything else will just kind of come like weird, wild, and worried. Okay. And then yeah, just I guess like I guess I'm trying to end these videos with like words of encouragement. So um I think today though I'm just gonna let you guys know that yesterday my mom finished a full marathon, and I was like, damn, like that was so impressive that like I think I wanna start running and like kind of try to achieve that as well. So I think tomorrow I'm gonna, or like tonight or today, I'm gonna start running to train. And like, mind you, I hate running, bro. Like for real. I hate running so much. But I know it's good for me. And I think it's gonna be something that I should do in order to like kind of build up my tolerance for like being consistent. But yeah. So the the lesson of the day is, if you are thinking of something like, oh, I want to really do boxing, or I want to really learn this new sport, or I want to take up knitting, okay, seriously, just do it. Just do it, because you're gonna regret it if you don't do it right. And it doesn't matter if you're a beginner. It doesn't matter if you're bad at it or good at it. I think the key is you keep doing it until you get to a point where like you're like, damn, I really accomplished that. Okay, so be consistent. Um, Studying isn't everything. You definitely have time to pick up a hobby and or two. And so I'm gonna leave it with that. Thank you for watching. Peace.